This video is kind of going to feel like I'm your high school teacher telling you that social media is the end of the world. But it kind of is like that, but I promise it's not. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Zharia and I typically make commentary videos just like this one. Today's video, I'm actually going to talk about a little quirky thing called media literacy. Now, media literacy is something that I feel as though has been kind of lacking these past couple of years, especially with the pandemic and people not kind of understanding how to read things online and think critically. I also, when I was in college, throwback, I was literally in college like 3 months ago, but back when I was in college, I actually took two different classes on media literacy. I also took a class on media ethics and social media specifically. So I'm a media gal and I see a lot of things online. And with the recent, people going crazy, politicians going crazy about spreading misinformation about trans youth, drag queens being banned from performing, just a lot of transgender hate, LGBTQ hate, and anything just like that has been spread all over online. Not even to mention all of the stupid alpha males and whatever stuff that's been online, kind of spreading so much misinformation. And oftentimes we tell people, like, hey, just do your own research. But sometimes that own research can be biased and messed up in its own type of way. So I kind of wanted to talk about media literacy. Today's video is going to be more of a stream of consciousness, like my last video. And what kind of made me want to talk about media literacy in general is because in my last video, I talked about a creator named Tara's World, or Tara Lynn. She's an interesting gal and said a lot of heinous things online and has done a lot of horrible things such as blackface and isn't very conscious of herself and things that she says and how that can be perceived. And while a person on the baseline can be like, oh, this girl is stupid for saying that she's straight but likes to kiss girls, or, saying slurs towards lesbians, whatever the case may be, at the end of the day, whatever she's putting out online and how we interpret it and how we read it is very important. And as a commentary YouTuber like myself, I don't really want people to just be online and even take what I say at face value, because I could have motivations that you don't even know. I mean, I really don't, but I could also be lying to you right then, saying that I don't have motivations, but I do. I am a left-leaning person. I'm LGBT. I am black, so I do have some biases within myself. So I always encourage people to have media literacy, but I haven't made a specific video on it. So I wanted today's video to just kind of be like a baseline, like a commentary fans guideline to media literacy and the importance of things like that. I actually went back and I looked at my old textbooks and my old resources that I had for my media literacy classes and my media ethics classes, just to make sure that I wasn't missing anything, because I paid for those classes, but you don't have to. So media literacy is kind of in a way seen as the critical analysis of the accuracy of media being put out based on their credibility and accuracy. So think about, for instance, what's a good example? A Republican may say the reason why they don't want to, sign off on gender affirming care for children is because there is a high, rate of people that are detransitioning. When in reality, the amount of people that are detransitioning to those who have transitioned are a very, very small percentage of people and don't represent the vast amount of transgender youth, which already there are, what is it, like 1% of the population is transgender. So then less of a 1% of population are actually people that are detransitioning fully. But also, gender expression is a spectrum and some people just need that care so they don't off themselves, which is another statistic people don't like to bring up, is the fact that people who don't receive this care just unalive themselves. So that's something to consider. So my notes are going to be right here. So sorry, the picture isn't going to be in the background anymore. I know you guys liked it so much, but a lot of the resources that I have for media literacy came from this company organization called NAML, which stands for the National Association for Media Literacy Education. Very important. Online we see so often that people like Donald Trump will say that injecting I don't know, bleach helps cure COVID, which it doesn't. And people take that at face value and kind of run with it. So they say that the purpose of media literacy education is more so it's to help individuals of all ages and demographics kind of dissect and understand the media that they're consuming, to develop the habits of critical thinking skills and education. So there are some requirements that a name will, list as things that you need to do for, proper media literacy education, which is active inquiry and critical thinking about the messages we receive and create, expanding the concept of literacy, like reading and writing, to include all forms of media, build and reinforce skills for learners of all ages, like print literacy. Those skills necessitate integrated, interactive, and repeated practice. It develops informed, reflective, and engaged participants essential for a democratic society. Recognizes the media are part of culture and function as agents of socialization, and media education affirms that people use their skills, beliefs, and experiences to construct their meanings from media messages. So, whenever we're looking at media, we kind of want to ask a bunch of questions whenever we're looking at something. Like, for instance, if I see a TikTok of a person talking about how if I, improve my gut health, that will get rid of eczema or whatever it is. This is kind of some things that can break down and kind of ask the questions whenever you're consuming any media, like what I'm talking about right now. Like, if you're watching me right now, ask these questions about me, because I could be unreliable for all we know. So the questions to ask are: who made this? Why was it made? What does this message particularly want me to do? Who is the target audience? Who are they talking to? Who is this for? If it's a promotional message, like who paid for this? Which is important, because if you see, for instance, an ad, a person does a partnership with, let's say, I don't know, Olay, and they say that their skin has become so much more nice and luscious and they look like they're anti-age. Who paid for that ad? Olay paid for that ad, so something to consider. I don't have beef towards Olay. I actually used to use Olay when I was in middle school, but that's another really important question to ask. You may also want to ask, what actions may I take after receiving this message? How does this make me feel? Do my emotions kind of influence the way that I'm feeling about the message that I just listened to? What does the message want me to think about or want me to think? Period. What is something that could have been left out that would be important to know? What techniques are used and why? We think about things that appeal to emotion versus things that appeal to logic and so on and so forth. People use it all the time. How might different people understand this message differently? Think of this more of like for instance, a racial issue. Like, a person who is Black may say something that is very specific to the Black experience, and a person who, let's say, is Filipino may not have the same experience and may interpret a message that was put out as different. That doesn't necessarily mean that whatever was said was wrong, but it's kind of important to think about, how would someone else hear this? How would someone else, if the message is about, let's say, a transgender youth and the person talking is a straight white man, think about how a transgender person would feel about what that person is saying. Something to consider. That's very important when it comes to media literacy, actually. Where or how is it shared with the public? Obviously, if you see something shared on the Daily Mail, it probably isn't as accurate or as reputable as, let's say, the New York Times. The New York Times also does make mistakes as well, but that's an example. Is this fact or opinion? Some people like to phrase their opinions as facts, but it's important to see if something actually is a fact over an opinion. How credible is this? Like I said, New York Times versus Daily Mail. Who are you more likely to trust? Probably New York Times. What is the source of the information? Like, for instance, for me, whenever I make any sort of video that's talking about deep information, like this video, I'm probably going to have some sources down below, but this is a lot of my own thoughts and feelings about media literacy. But I always have sources in my description, so if you don't trust what I said, you can look back and see where I got my information from. I always try to do that, just so you can kind of see where my brain got to where I got to. And that in itself, the sources that you use can also have their own biases, such as Fox News has a lot of bias, or the Epoch Times, a lot of bias. This is back. I'm no longer reading off notes, so you guys get the picture again. It's so pretty, right? So another thing that I wanted to talk about was kind of like biases that can come across online and in general, because a lot of times, and I hate using a lot of politics because I don't try to make the channel very political. I am a left-leaning person, but I try to not push that on people because I understand people have different opinions for different reasons. But a big bias is political bias as well as, racial bias. Now, for instance, I saw a TikTok. I hate TikTok, but I saw a TikTok of this person who proposed a bill, and I want to say Missouri. And in the bill, the writer wrote that they wanted to not include mentions of gender identity or sexual orientation inside of classrooms, which, you can say whatever you want about that. But something that addresses sexual orientation is the fact that Barack Obama is married to Michelle Obama, because being straight is sexual orientation. So little things like that kind of are interesting to look at. And the person obviously wanted to just exclude discussions about, LGBT people, but decided to say sexual orientation. And sometimes people don't even understand the words that they're using because they want to make it sound more general, but they know what they want to say. There's things that people trying to reinforce Jim Crow laws, people trying to obviously block health care for transgender youth or eradicate people being transgender at all, like some sort of mass genocide, which is pretty interesting coming from the Daily Wire. But all this to say is that people have bias. I have bias. Like, literally, one thing that I almost got canceled for, which I understand how it could have been perceived, but I said the white boy summer. Chet Hanks made a video a while ago talking about white boy summer, and I said white boy summer sounds like a threat. People found an offense to that and made me and tried to cancel me and proceeded to call me slurs in my comment section. Yes, that video is no longer available on my channel. You cannot find it. But I didn't take into consideration how a person who may be a white male would have interpreted that. And if you are a minority, you might be thinking, I don't care what they think. They oppressed me for, X amount of years of my life, put me in this position, whatever the case may be. It's just important to understand that we all have biases. I have biases. You have biases, and it's okay, but it's also important to make sure to acknowledge that you do have those biases because it'll help you consume media better and understand it more fully. So obviously with the pandemic, we've had a big rise of fake news. Though fake news has always been a thing, literally the beginning of, that's one thing that I learned in my media classes, is the beginning of journalism. A good chunk of it was fake, and they were kind of making stories more than what they were supposed to be just because they wanted to get clicks. Sensationalism. I have a video on sensationalism if you want to check it out. It's very old, but it still has good information on there when I was learning about it when I was in school. But fake news and disinformation / misinformation is something that is spread through our world so easily. I have some people that only get their news from Twitter. It's a little alarming. Or even like I watch Philip DeFranco every single morning. I'll watch the show from yesterday in the morning when I'm getting ready for work. And I don't know, I just like the news. But I also have subscribed to Washington Post and New York Times. I look at Medium articles. I like the news. I like to find out what's happening. I like to watch the News for Jax. I live in Jacksonville. News for Jax on the TV as well. I do a lot of things, but that's just because I like to know what's going on in my world. I used to try to avoid the news because of how depressing it was, but I find that it's better to learn that there is a comet coming towards the Earth right now and could kill us in 5 months than to find out when the comet is there. Just little things like that. But I go through this to say that some people will spread fake news just to make their points come across better, or say the most weird and crazy things that could be easily fact-checked on Snopes, for God's sakes, but some people just won't do that extra step to make sure something is real. And I think that when it comes to media literacy, you can obviously look at something and be like, this obviously looks fake, but it could also not be fake. So you kind of have to play it by ear, I think that when it comes to Tara's world, like I mentioned, when I first heard the stories, like when I saw that picture of her in blackface, I didn't believe it was her. And I went through a long thread to find out that it actually was her. And that was her Twitter account. And then I was like, oh, wow. But I have the benefit of the doubt a lot of times whenever I see a lot of crazy things, especially when it comes to deep fakes happening right now with AI. I have a video on AI as well. That people can say the most crazy things and it will not be them at all. And it'll be fake and fabricated. But we can try our best to kind of identify what is fake and what is not fake to the best of our abilities. Another thing that I wanted to mention, which isn't necessarily, I guess it is kind of a part of media literacy, but kind of looking at the messages that you see online, especially social media posts, like I cannot express enough. If you are on TikTok and someone is telling you on TikTok how to make $10,000 a month and they're going to sell you a course, That's not how they make $10,000 a month. They make $10,000 a month off of selling you that course because they know that you're stupid. Not stupid, but easily gullible or wanting to have the benefit of the doubt in people. That's how people get scammed, and that's how people such as, I don't know, I'll say Grant Cardone. I don't know what he does, but Grant Cardone or Ty Lopez, that's how they make their money. That's how they get their Lamborghinis and private jets, is because they're scamming poor innocent people that just want to make money and not be um, living paycheck to paycheck. Something as simple as that. Another thing that I want to talk about is I recently saw a TikTok trend. I'm going to talk about it really briefly. There's this poet who made this wonderful, gorgeous poem. And in it, she said, "This boy be in my DM. He says I'm pretty." And it's very, it's very lightweight. There is music in the background. It's very cute. And people have been using this audio on TikTok to make thirst traps, to post themselves looking all cute. Like, "This boy be in my DM. He say I'm pretty." Like, whatever. However, if a person were to have just a little bit of media literacy and perhaps listen to that entire clip, they would know that the person is talking about how oftentimes people only want to be with or be around Black women when no one is around in the DM, something that's private. People who only talk to you during the nighttime and not during the daytime. They only want to see you in certain spaces because they feel embarrassed to be around you because you are simply Black and they don't want to be seen with a Black person. This can be with any race, Black men as well. It's honestly very disheartening, and I've talked about it before in one video or another. I can never keep track at this point, but that's what the trend is about. So when you have people posting thirst traps of this video, like, "This boy be in my DM saying I'm pretty," but it's like he's in your DM calling you pretty because he doesn't feel comfortable telling you that in general, saying that behind a screen, not actually like wanting to be around you. It's important to look at messages and see what they mean. You want to actually know what you're singing along to and listening to. You don't just want to just do whatever because you don't know what you're saying. Someone could be placing a curse on you or whatever, and you don't even know. Everything in life can have an underlying message. And I'm not saying this video right now has an underlying message, but I guess it kind of does. I'm talking about being conscious of what you're consuming online. But a lot of things can be propaganda and we don't even realize it. Like, we always make fun of like China, North Korea for how blatant their propaganda is. Literally that one movie with James Franco and Seth Rogen about going to North Korea and that whole thing. It's just interesting to notice, and I think that we don't realize in America is that all we're surrounded with is propaganda. Yeah, all that we're surrounded with is propaganda, and it's interesting because it's in very sneaky ways. Like, a lot of stuff we see, cop shows are trying to make us, trust the police. Marvel has a contract with the Pentagon, which is really interesting, like the MCU. And it's just, well, as a legend, I don't know for sure about the Marvel thing, but I saw it in a couple articles, so I have a tendency to believe it if I see it in multiple places. But all this to say is that a lot of things we can consume can be propaganda. So whenever you're watching, I don't know, Ant-Man and the Wasp, or you're watching whatever TV show or movie, just kind of think about it and see kind of what message you're trying to convey and what that means. And what it's trying to get you to feel, the questions that I mentioned previously. So it's also important to recognize stereotypes and things of that nature. Now, granted, there isn't really much these days. Most of the stereotypes that we see are towards LGBT people, not so much racial stereotypes. Well, sometimes, like in South Park, but South Park is South Park. I think it's really interesting, we characterize, let's say, for instance, if a Black journalist says something versus a white journalist, people will be more likely to listen to the white journalist because they trust them more, whatever the case may be. I mean, we have so many biases, like I'll never forget when I was doing, I don't remember what class I was in, but I had to make a video on that little experiment where they had a bunch of kids identify the good doll versus the bad doll, and the bad doll was Black, but then, they asked Black kids, like, which doll you look like, and they're like, the bad one, and it's so heartbreaking and upsetting. But when it comes to looking at the media and seeing the stuff like this, like stereotypes, like all the misogynistic men online characterizing women as, nothing, basically. We look at that, and that's a stereotype that women are supposed to just stay at home and have children. Firstly, a lot of women can't have children. Not even from a transgender versus cisgender way. I'm just saying baseline. A lot of women cannot have children. Like, what is it? Like 1 in 3 couples have issues when it comes to having children. Straight couples. So all this to say is that just the capability of having children does not make a person a woman or whatever it is. But just think about the things that you see. And if you are a person that's kind of getting sucked into that, think about why they're saying this and what they're trying to make you do or say, because that's pretty important and it's kind of monumental when you look at it from like a long-term perspective. So on social media, obviously there's Facetune, there's Photoshop, there's all these things that can kind of make their lives appear to be something different or things that it's not. And I mean, there was a trend, people were pretending to go to Coachella or go on different trips to try to trick their followers. Whatever the case may be, I think it's just important for us to kind of sit back and kind of reflect and see what is true, what is not, to the best of our abilities, and kind of work our way through that. Because on social media, it is hard. I see so many tweets and I think it's so funny, and then I go on to look more into it and it's fake, and I'm like, great, this is so sad. Like, for instance, the fact that Trisha Paytas gave birth not on the same day that Queen Elizabeth died, and I truly believe that, like, Trisha Paytas not only like named her daughter Elizabeth because she was born on the same day Queen Elizabeth died, but that wasn't true. She gave birth days later and named her daughter Malibu Barbie, which is a cute name. I'm team Malibu Barbie because it's so cute. But all this to say is that we are constantly battling, trying to make sure that we're, being conscious of what we consume. And I feel like that when you're watching commentary videos, especially video essays, we do give our sources and things like that, but it's also important to kind of sit back and kind of notice like what is real and what is not. So I guess that's my video. Like I said, it was going to be a very short one. I didn't want it to be too long, but if you guys like this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up because it helps the little channels like mine. Make sure to subscribe to me as well. I would really enjoy that. I really want to get to 10,000 subscribers, and I'm relatively close, but not extremely close. So if you can help me with that, I would love it so much. And I guess that's pretty much it. Leave your comments down below on your opinions on media literacy, some resources if you think that would be really helpful for anybody trying to watch. And yeah, I guess that's literally it. So make sure to stay happy, stay healthy, and stay safe. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.